Today's story is about a con man who was once called the biggest con man in American history. During his frauds, this con man sometimes became a pilot, sometimes a lawyer, and sometimes a doctor. And every time he escaped. He became so famous across America that Hollywood made an entire movie about him, which I'll tell you about later. So who was this con man? How did he keep changing his identity and committing frauds? And which movie was made on his life? You'll be shocked to know. This con man's name was Frank Abagnale. Frank started his fraud journey in the year 1964 when he was just 16 years old. When Frank was 16, his parents got divorced, and because of that, he ran away from home and moved to New York. Since Frank had very little money, he needed work and money to survive. That's why he started doing small part-time jobs in New York. These jobs at least gave him 2 meals a day, but the income was very low. Since Frank was only 16 years old, and he knew very well that wherever he'd go for work, his young age would be a problem. He wouldn't get a good job or good pay. However, Frank looked older than his actual age, and he was 5 feet 11 inches tall. He took advantage of this and committed his first fraud. The American government starts making driving licenses from the age of 16, and Frank had one too. According to his license, he was 16 years old, with a birth date of March 13th, 1948. Frank changed this to March 13th, 1938. Now Frank had become 26 years old instead of 16. Then he applied again for the same jobs he did before. But now, because he was an adult, his salary was much better than before. This was his first fraud, where he changed his age to get a better job and salary. And from there began his journey of conning. After this, his greed kept growing and he started doing bigger frauds. During this time, Frank got a job as a floor supervisor in a hotel. His duty was to manage cleaning of the floors and take care of guest luggage. At the hotel, he would often see pilots, co-pilots, and air hostesses coming and going. Frank was very impressed by the uniform and lifestyle of those pilots. He used to think, if he were a pilot, he could travel the world for free and stay anywhere. That's when he decided he would become a fake pilot. As soon as he made that decision, he started working on it right away, without thinking how he would arrange all the little details related to being a pilot, or how he would get inside the airport as a fake pilot. Then the name of a famous American airline, Pan Am, came to his mind. Frank decided he would become a fake pilot of that airline. Now, the most important thing for Frank was to get a pilot's uniform. For this, he called Pan Am and told them he was a co-pilot and had lost his uniform. In response, Pan Am gave him the address of the uniform manufacturing company, where pilot uniforms were made. They told him he could go there and get a new pilot uniform. Frank went to the manufacturing company, got a uniform in his size and fitting, and told them that Pan Am would pay for it, that they would deduct the cost from his salary. In this way, Frank arranged for a pilot's uniform. But now the most important and final thing left was a pilot ID card. For that, he would have to give his name and details to Pan Am. So this time, he didn't call Pan Am. Instead, he started looking for the company that made ID cards for Pan Am pilots. After a few days of research and investigation, he found the company. He went there and told them that he owned a company and wanted to get ID cards made for his employees. At the same time, he told them that he really liked the pilot cards they had made for Pan Am. Hearing this praise, the company got happy and agreed to deal with Frank. Frank asked them to make a sample pilot card like Pan Am's, with his photo on it. Since Frank had told them he would give a big order, the company made him a sample pilot ID card with his photo. But on that pilot card, he didn't write his real name, Frank Abagnale. Instead, he used the name Frank Taylor to hide his true identity. Now Frank had both, the pilot uniform and the pilot ID card. And just a few days later, wearing his uniform and ID card, he started going from one airport to another. He wanted to fully blend into the airport environment, understand the system and the process. And when he felt that now he had become familiar with airports and flights, Frank decides that now that he knows quite a lot about airports and flights, he will take his first flight. But he was neither a pilot nor an employee of Pan Am Airlines. So how did he get inside the plane? Since Frank had learned every process of the airport and flights, he used something called deadheading to board the plane. Deadheading is a feature in airlines where any pilot or flight attendant can sit in any flight to go from one place to another where they are on duty, and that too for free. Now Frank, wearing a pilot uniform, would go on flights, and by showing his fake ID card, he would use deadheading to travel from one city to another. On the plane, he would even get free food and drinks. While getting off the flight, he would always keep some food and snacks separately so that he wouldn't have any food problems. In this way, pretending to be a fake pilot, he traveled for free and ate free food for 2 years. By the age of just 18, he had traveled on 250 flights into 26 countries. Now people had started to recognize Frank, and one day a flight attendant grew suspicious that he wasn't actually a pilot. He reported it to the airport authority, but Frank got a hint of this in advance and escaped from New York to Atlanta. Let me tell you, during all this time, Frank used to cash fake checks in New York banks, and because of that, he had earned so much money that he could live his life comfortably. After coming to Atlanta, he rented an apartment and made a rent agreement. Since while making a rent agreement, both parties' full details are required, like their name, job, and profession. This time Frank said he was a children's doctor from California who was currently on a paid research break and needed an apartment for his research stay. Everything was going well until one day there was a knock on his door. The person knocking was his neighbor who introduced himself as Dr. Willis Grung and also said that he was a child medical advisor at Smithers General Hospital. Hearing this, Frank started sweating and became afraid that Dr. Willis might catch him as a fake doctor. But Dr. Willis had come just to make friends with Frank and invite him to his hospital. Frank kept avoiding Dr. Willis's invitation for many days and made some excuse every time to not go to the hospital because he feared he might get caught. But in the meantime, he got a fake doctor's degree certificate made for himself, which stated that Frank had received a medical degree from Harvard University. Frank started spending more and more time in the public library so that he could learn more about children's illnesses, their treatments, and medicines. He was doing this so that his lie wouldn't be caught, and if someone asked him questions related to being a children's doctor, he could easily answer them. After a few days, Frank felt that he had now learned quite a bit about children's diseases and the medicines given to them, and so he accepted Dr. Willis's invitation to visit the hospital. After this hospital visit, Frank and Dr. Willis became very good friends, and Frank started going to his hospital frequently. One day, the hospital director tells Frank that they need his help because one of their doctors is going on a 10-day leave, and they want Frank to work in his place for those 10 days. Frank gets very nervous and tells the hospital director that he doesn't have a license to practice in Atlanta because his license is only valid in California. To this, the director says that he only needs to take a test from the nurse lab panel committee, and if he passes, he could become the supervisor doctor for the night shift. At first, Frank was scared to take the test because he thought he would get caught, but then he took it as a challenge and agreed to give the test. Luckily, the committee interview was very easy. They asked Frank where he lived, where he got his medical degree from, and a few medicines for some common illnesses, which Frank had already studied in the library. He answered everything easily and passed the committee test, and in this way, he became a night shift supervisor doctor. Now Frank had 40 nurses and lab staff working under him. To avoid directly checking the patients, Frank came up with a trick. He gave all the trainee doctors full freedom to treat patients without asking him first, and they could take full help from any nurse. And in this way, the 10 days passed too. But on the 10th day, the director came and told Frank that the doctor who went on leave was not coming back, and they wanted to keep Frank permanently in his place. And Frank agreed to it. The most surprising thing was that a person who was neither a doctor nor had any experience in the medical field was the supervisor of a hospital's doctor team, because of which many children's lives were in danger. And everything was going fine here too, until one day, a child's condition became very serious in the emergency room. Because of that, Frank, being the senior doctor supervisor, started being called to the emergency room so the child's condition could be brought under control. At first, Frank kept wasting time, thinking some trained doctor would handle the situation. But when he was called repeatedly, he finally went to the emergency room and saw that a child was lying in an injured condition and was in a very serious state. Since Frank didn't know how to handle such situations, he asked the 3 trainee doctors standing there what should be done. He asked the trainee doctors questions in such a way that they felt like Frank was testing them. One of the trainee doctors suggested a treatment, and everyone agreed and started treating the child. In this way, Frank cleverly and smartly escaped the situation once again. Now, Frank had been working at the hospital for 11 months. And after this emergency room incident, he started to feel that children's lives could be at risk because of him. That's when he decided that he would run away from there. He left his apartment and hospital job and ran away to Louisiana. After reaching Louisiana, he met a girl to whom he said that he had studied law at Harvard University. The Harvard Law degree is considered the most valuable degree in America. Frank often went to parties with that girl. One day, at such a party, that girl introduced Frank to the state's public prosecutor, whom she worked for. The name of the public prosecutor was Jason Wilcox. As soon as Jason found out that Frank had a law degree from Harvard University and was unemployed, he told Frank that he was currently looking for a young advocate to work with him. And if Frank wanted, he could take the bar exam and work with him. The bar exam is a written exam that lawyers must pass to get a license to practice. This exam must be given in each state to get a license there. Although Frank had a fake law degree from Harvard University, he still needed a license to practice in Louisiana, for which passing the bar exam was necessary. Even though the bar exam is very difficult, Frank accepted it as a challenge. He also made a fake Harvard University degree for himself here, too, and started preparing hard for the bar exam. Surprisingly, he passed the bar exam, the same bar exam that only lawyers can pass. This showed that Frank, along with being a clever fraud, was also a very intelligent person who could easily understand anything and adapt to it completely. Now, Frank had become a lawyer who had both a degree and a license to practice. The surprising thing was that Frank had done all this by the age of just 19. Along with this, he also started working as a lawyer in the public prosecutor's office. Just a few weeks had passed since he started working, when one day, a lawyer came to their office who had actually obtained his law degree from Harvard University. As soon as he found out that Frank also had a degree from Harvard, he started asking Frank various questions, like in which year he got his degree, who his law professor was, etc. Frank got very nervous from his questions and felt that he was going to get caught. So, he made an excuse and ran away from the public prosecutor's office. After running away from there, he reached Utah, where he convinced the Brigham University administration that he was a professor and started working there as a professor for 8 months. But Brigham University still denies this because it would bring them a lot of shame that a con man had fooled them. However, during these years, Frank had become a wanted criminal, and both the FBI and Interpol were after him, trying to track him down. Now Frank left America and ran off to Europe, where he continued committing frauds. And then, one day came when his luck stopped working. One morning, while Frank was leaving to commit a fraud in France, Interpol arrested him. Interpol arrested him under an arrest warrant from Sweden, which was released when Frank, posing as a pilot, had cashed fake checks. After spending a few months in a French jail, the French government sent him back to America, where the court sentenced him to 12 years in prison. During this 12-year sentence, he escaped from jail twice, but was caught both times. After spending 4 years in prison, the FBI offered Frank a deal. The deal was that Frank would help the FBI solve fraud cases, especially those related to checks, in exchange for being released from jail. Because Frank was a master at creating fake checks that looked exactly like real ones, even bank officials were fooled. And using this skill, Frank helped the FBI solve many fraud cases, after which the FBI released him. Frank is still alive today, and he is 71 years old. He still helps the FBI solve fraud cases and also provides security expert services to many companies. As I mentioned at the beginning, Hollywood also made a movie about Frank's cons called Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by Steven Spielberg. This movie turned out to be a huge hit and earned over $1 billion. I hope this video also gets the same love from all of you. How did you find this story? Let me know in the comments section. Like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.